There are some stories that seem small at first, almost harmless, like a strange coincidence or a simple mistake. But the more you listen, the more you realize something dark was slowly moving in the background, waiting to be noticed. And this is one of those stories where nothing felt dangerous in the beginning, yet everything was already watching, already knowing, already inside the house long before anyone understood what was happening. And by the end, something hidden for years finally revealed itself in a way that could never be taken back. So stay with this story carefully, because every detail matters. And before we start, please subscribe if you haven't already. The woman had moved into the house during early spring when the air still felt cold in the mornings but warm by afternoon. And it seemed like the perfect fresh start after her divorce. A quiet street, tall trees lining the sidewalks, and neighbors who mostly kept to themselves. And the house itself was old but clean, with creaky wooden floors, wide windows that let in soft light, and a small mailbox at the end of the driveway that looked like it had been there for decades. And for the first few weeks, everything felt normal in the way boring life is normal. She woke up early, made coffee, went to work, came home tired, cooked simple meals, and spent evenings watching television or reading, while the house slowly settled with its soft, cracking noises that old buildings always make. And she even liked those sounds because they made the place feel lived in, like the house was breathing along with her. About a month after moving in, she checked the mailbox one evening and noticed a pale yellow envelope sitting inside, slightly bent like someone had pushed it in too hard, and the handwriting on the front looked careful and neat, written with a dark pen that pressed deep into the paper, and it was addressed to a name she did not recognize at all. It said, "For Emily Carter," followed by the house address. And at first she assumed it was just leftover mail from the previous owners, something that got lost in the system. So she brought it inside, planning to mark it returned to sender later. But out of curiosity, she turned it over and noticed there was no return address, just a blank corner where one should have been, which felt odd but not alarming. She left it on the kitchen counter and forgot about it until later that night when she was washing dishes and glanced over at it again. And something about the envelope made her uneasy, not in a scared way, more in the way a person feels when someone stares at them a little too long in public. So without really thinking about it, she opened it, expecting a bill or a school letter or something normal. But inside was a single sheet of paper folded neatly in half, and the handwriting matched the front perfectly, slow and careful like someone who took their time. And it said, "Emily, I saw you sitting on the living room floor today playing with your blocks near the window. You left the red one by the couch again. Please don't forget to clean up before bedtime." And the woman stood there holding the paper while the sink water continued running, her heart slowly picking up speed as she looked over toward the living room where her couch sat in the same place described in the letter. And even though she had no children, even though she lived alone, the details felt too specific to ignore. She told herself it had to be some strange prank or someone confusing houses, maybe a neighbor with memory problems, maybe an old resident writing letters for a child who no longer lived there. So she crumpled the letter slightly, threw it away, and tried to laugh it off while her chest still felt tight. But that night she had trouble sleeping because every small noise in the house felt louder than usual, every soft creak of the floor sounding like a step, every gust of wind against the windows sounding like breath. 2 days later, another letter appeared in the mailbox, same yellow envelope, same careful handwriting. And again, it was addressed to Emily Carter, and this time the woman didn't open it right away. She stood by the mailbox staring at it while a cold feeling spread across her arms, even though the afternoon sun was warm, and she almost left it there. But curiosity pulled stronger than fear. So she brought it inside and opened it slowly, and inside the letter read, "Emily, you were up late last night. The hallway light stayed on past 11. You kept walking back and forth like you couldn't sleep. It reminded me of when you used to have bad dreams. You should try to rest more. The dark watches better when you are tired. And her hands started shaking so badly, she almost dropped the paper. Because she had been pacing the hallway that night unable to sleep, turning the light on and off while her mind raced. And no one should have known that unless they were inside the house. From that moment on, the house no longer felt like a safe, quiet place. It felt like a stage where someone unseen was always sitting in the audience, watching every movement, listening to every breath. And she started checking locks repeatedly, pulling on doors to make sure they were closed, peeking through windows before changing clothes, and jumping whenever her phone rang unexpectedly. But the letters kept coming every few days, sometimes describing her cooking dinner, sometimes mentioning which television show she watched, sometimes talking about small habits she never realized she had, like tapping her fingers on the counter while waiting for the microwave or humming quietly while brushing her teeth. One letter said, "Emily, you cried in the bathroom this morning. The mirror fogged up and you wiped it with your sleeve just like you always used to. Sadness still follows you around this house." And another said, "Emily, you locked the bedroom door last night, but it didn't help. You always did that when you were scared. Remember how the closet light used to flicker?" And that was when the woman finally lost the ability to pretend it was coincidence, because she had noticed the closet light flicker several times already, but told herself it was faulty wiring. She contacted the post office asking if they knew where the letters were coming from, but without a return address, there was nothing they could trace. And she spoke to a neighbor who had lived on the street for many years. And when she mentioned the name Emily Carter, the neighbor's face went pale and quiet in a way that made the woman's stomach drop. And after a long pause, the neighbor explained that a family had lived in that house years ago with a little girl named Emily. And one night the girl had gone missing. And after weeks of searching, they found her body hidden inside the walls of the house, wrapped in blankets behind the closet area. And the case had never fully been solved because there was no sign of forced entry, and no one could explain how it happened without someone inside the home knowing. The woman felt like the floor was tilting beneath her as she listened, because suddenly the letters were no longer just creepy. They felt like echoes of something unfinished, something still trapped. And when she returned home that day, she walked through each room slowly, noticing how the hallway felt colder than the rest of the house, how the closet area always smelled faintly dusty no matter how much she cleaned, and how sometimes late at night she could swear she heard soft footsteps pacing back and forth, just like the letters described. That night she received another letter, but this one was thicker than the others, and inside was not just a note but a small child's drawing folded carefully, showing a stick figure girl standing in a room with dark shapes around her, and the words written unevenly beneath said, "Emily doesn't like hiding anymore." And below that in the careful adult handwriting it said, "They are finally ready to be seen." Fear pushed her into action, and she called a contractor the next morning pretending she wanted to remodel the closet area. And while the workers began removing sections of the wall, the woman stood trembling in the hallway, her heart pounding louder with every crack of breaking wood and falling plaster. And then the smell came, old and sour and heavy, the kind of smell that doesn't belong in a living home. And one of the workers froze, staring into the open wall space, where something wrapped in rotted fabric was barely visible behind the beams. Police were called, the house was sealed off, and it turned out that more remains had been hidden deeper inside the structure. Not just the child's, but also an adult body, and records later showed it belonged to the girl's father, who had supposedly disappeared shortly after Emily's death. And investigators believed he had killed his daughter and then himself inside the walls, sealing them in before anyone noticed. But what none of them could explain was how the letters knew what the woman was doing in real time, how they described moments that happened hours earlier, and how the last letter appeared that same night after the bodies were removed, sitting quietly in the mailbox waiting for her. And when she opened it with shaking hands, it read, "Emily is not alone anymore. The house is empty again. Thank you for letting us out." And at the bottom, in messy childlike writing, it said, "Now they can see you too." And when she lifted her eyes from the paper, she noticed muddy footprints leading from the hallway toward her bedroom closet, small ones beside larger ones, fresh and wet as if someone had just walked through the house, even though the floors were clean moments before. And as the closet door slowly creaked open on its own, she realized the letters had never been warnings about a ghost watching her. They were reminders that the house had always been home to something that never truly left, something that only needed someone new inside to wake it up again.